Tighten up, leaders. Welcome to the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership, the show that drills into the foundations of what leadership is all about. I'm your producer and co-host, Hali Gibson.
And I'm your host, Billy Duran.
Join us as we sit down with leaders from across the country to mine for nuggets of wisdom.
All right, everyone, welcome into the meeting room. Today, we're going to be talking about leadership because this is the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership podcast. I'm the host, Billy Duran, and I'm going to welcome into the meeting room today, Hali Gibson. She is our producer and co-host. Hali, I'm waiting for the wisdom nugget of the week.
Well, on the podcast, I've talked a little bit about my running journey. I'm not a great runner, but I have a sister-in-law who her running advice to me has always been once you hit the 20-minute mark, it just gets easier. Once you hit that 20-minute mark of running, then kind of the runner's high hits you, and then you're just able to continue on. So in the past couple of months, I've been trying to hit that 20-minute mark and make that run easier, those long runs easier. And I've started to realize that she's right. At that 20-minute mark, it just becomes easier, and you kind of let out this breath, and you just know, okay, I can do this. To tie it into the ESOP, I feel like there's a little bit of, with new employees, they have to hit that 20-minute mark in order to know what that ESOP is. It takes a little while for them to get it, but once they do get it, then they know that it is a huge impact on them.
Well, I can tell you've cheated. You've looked over at my notes today because we're going to be talking about ESOP. So you stole from me already because, you know, when we want to talk about ESOP, we have to go find someone. We have to climb the mountain. We have to go and look for the experts. And today we have Ashley Bryan, who is our CFO at Threaded Fasteners. I looked up the word guru, Ashley, and it says is an influential or popular expert. And then, of course, our engineer came in and told us, Johnny told us that it's someone also who's sought out. So we sought out for an expert because we're kicking off Employee Ownership Month, the month of October. And we're excited about having you here today to talk to us about employee ownership. So, and by the way, Hali, this is the second time guest that we've had on the podcast.
That is true.
First time we've had someone making a second appearance. So, Ashley, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me, and I appreciate that warm welcome. I don't know that I'd call myself the expert. There's a lot to learn about ESOPs. They're pretty complicated. But just to tell you a little bit about ESOPs are an employee stock ownership plan, and this is a formal retirement plan that owns the stock of a company, and the employees have beneficial interest in that ownership. And shares of stock are allocated to the employees' accounts over time, and participants are able to benefit from the growth of the company. Ultimately, with an ESOP, there is a payout to the participants once they separate from employment and meet the rules of the plan. And our ESOPs are also governed by their plan document, so the specifics of an ESOP can vary from company to company.
So, actually, when people talk about retirement plans, generally, first thing you think about is 401k. And we have both. Matter of fact, we have the ESOP and the 401k. So, if you were to separate those two things, just, you know, briefly, what are the difference in the mechanics of the 401k versus the ESOP?
Yep. So, a 401k is what most people are familiar with. There is typically a company match, and you are going to defer some of your compensation into your 401k plan. An ESOP, or at least the way ours is structured, is set up a little bit different. And you don't have to defer some of your income through a withholding or even make a payment to join our ESOP. However, it does involve embracing Threaded's company and culture and our mission to create value in and for the people we serve. It also involves our team members working hard to serve our customers, our business partners, and even team members around them. It involves a commitment to grow their individual skill set and to help the people around them grow their skill set. And it also involves embracing our core values, humble, hungry, and aware, so that we can be the best versions of ourselves.
So our character, our core values, humble, hungry, aware, you've already mentioned our mission statement, which is to create value in and for the people we serve. So when it comes to value proposition, what would you say, just kind of right off the cuff, what is the value proposition for employee ownership? Just what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Yeah, so employee ownership allows you to better participate in the overall outcome of the company. So as an employee owner, you are going to be the recipient of the beneficial interest of ownership, and your retirement account will be able to grow because of that structure.
So we've been doing this for quite some time, and what would you say? So, when we talk about being an employee-owned company and how that goes through the company, through the organization, and we're going to talk about how to communicate this and how we communicate it. But is it just automatic? Does it happen as soon as you become an employee-owned company? Everybody feels and acts like an owner?
Not at all. Not at all. It definitely takes some time for employees to understand that the ownership structure has changed and what their role might be in the new company and that employee ownership. But it does create an atmosphere where people care a little bit more and or value their job, but also the outcome of the company's success because they have a direct link to that.
So what if you were passing somebody in the hallway and you heard them say, it didn't cost anything to be an owner at Threaded Fasteners. It doesn't cost anything. It's free, right?
Well, we know that it's not because we just talked about all those things. So you've got to show up and contribute and be a part of the team.
So when we go back, when we talk about the early days of the ESOP, I know that there's a connection to Frank and Steve. So this goes back to that model that Frank sought out because when it was time for his exit, Frank Martin and Steve Schultes were the former owners of Threaded Fasteners, and they were looking for their exit plan. And this was long before you ever thought about Threaded Fasteners, and we were going through this transition. We have owners that are ready to exit the company, and Frank actually went out into the market and looked and see if there was a buyer out there. We saw people walk through our building, and I'm a keen observer of people walking through the building because I figured at some point they'd come talk to me and our leadership team that was there at the time. But fortunately for us, Frank met Daryl Bryant and Rick Scruggs, and these guys helped us walk through the transition from being a single owner or two guys owning the company, moving toward this employee ownership model. And so we were able to successfully buy Frank shares in 2006, and then we bought out Steve shares in 2012. We became 100% employee owned in 2012. So now we're 12 years in, and we're still learning about the ESOP and the mechanics of the ESOP and how that works. But tell us a little bit about how we're communicating employee ownership to our group. What are the things that we're doing? When we say, it just doesn't happen automatically, it happens because we communicate it and we talk about it. So tell us a little bit about some of the things, or tell our audience, rather, some of the things that we're doing to communicate what it is to be an owner at Threaded Fasteners.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important that you go back to the early days in discussing this. So early on, our ESOP was a partial ESOP, so partially owned by the ESOP, and the concept was announced. And employees at the time were educated by third-party advisors. You mentioned Rick Scruggs and Daryl Bryant. They would have helped, integrate and help people understand what was happening. And during this time, our employees were focused on doing their job, which ultimately resulted in income that allowed them to make purchases and overall support their families. And employees thought the concept was interesting, but it would be years before they would see a distribution or their coworkers would see a distribution. So it's a little bit of a theory still in the early days. Towards what I'll call the middle years, our company became 100% employee-owned, and there was a visible change in company leadership as the former owners exited fully, and they were off to enjoy their hard-earned retirement. The ESOP started to take root, and Debbie Rogers and the leadership team worked hard to help employees better understand the ESOP and the benefits it provided employees. During this time, employees working at the home office and close to team members that were passionate about the ESOP regularly discussed the benefits of the ESOP. Employees that did not have that opportunity, though, they didn't know much about the ESOP and how it would benefit them. So employees were still focused on doing their job well during this time, and they were helping grow the company. And a few participants received distributions during this time. And the idea that this might be real money, it really started to take off. And in our recent years, our company has grown due to the vision of our leadership team and the hard work of our dedicated employees. And during that time, it became apparent that talking about the ESOP at the home office was not going to help our team members at the operating locations understand the benefits of the ESOP. We started a program a few years ago we call our ESOP Advocate Program, and the goal was to ensure that we have an employee trained on the ESOP at every location. They also help us administer our ESOP Touchpoint activities, and they helped our team members better understand the ESOP at a local level. The program, the ESOP Advocate Program, did ultimately magnify our ability to better reach our employees by creating more team members that are passionate about employee ownership. And our employees are still focused currently on doing their job well and to help grow the company. But the employees are also starting to connect the dots on how the employee ownership can create a better working environment for today, but it can also impact their financial future. It does help that our team members know people who are receiving distributions, and that is proof that the benefit is real. Money helps, that is proof that it's real money, and that helps strengthen the financial stability of our team members in the retirement years.
It's really interesting because when I'm in our new employee orientation sessions now and the numbers going out on how much money is going out each year, and now we know that there are people that are receiving those checks, and you got Rick Dalton and Leroy Dunn and Jackie Griffith. I think about those are the first things kind of just pop into my mind as to people that were part of the group that was towing the rope. I mean, they were kind of pulling that train forward as we were getting momentum, and now they are receiving the real benefits of that. But you know that the real benefits are not just after retirement. The real benefits are seeing the growth, seeing the things that you're doing contributing directly to the growth of the company. So benefits are enormous. I did want to mention, you mentioned Rick Scruggs and Daryl Bryant, and then there was a team of people, and I think about Lisa Tilley and Michael Coffey, you know, how they helped us launch the ESOP and help manage those days when we were still trying to figure things out. I would say that I'm still on the side of still trying to figure things out. That's why Ashley has become such a strength in the organization. But Ashley, if you could pinpoint what were some of the challenges, whether it's the communication, where it's threading the needle on getting it just right on how and what we communicate. What are some of the challenges now in the midst of the ESOP?
Yeah, I think there are challenges with communication, right? So while we are very proud of our ESOP Advocate Program, we know that it's not a stagnant force. We've got to continue to evolve and adapt how and where and in what way we are communicating with our employees so that they can better understand the ESOP.
So you're a strategic thinker and how we use this going forward. So from a strategy standpoint, how do you believe that has helped us as a company just in general to say that we are an employee-owned company? So how does this help us promote, whether it's, hey, come join our team because we're an employee-owned? What are some other ways where this helps us strategically be an employee-owned company?
Yeah, I think, it's a key part of our hiring process that early on we need to talk about the benefit. It's a part of your compensation package when you work at Threaded Fasteners. And, early on we want to engage with the team member, make sure that they understand that it is a benefit and to help them begin the process of understanding what it is and what does it mean for them. So it's a key to the hiring process, but then it doesn't stop there. The education continues year after year. With the various programming to make sure they understand how it impacts the future for them individually. But then as a company, we believe that it does further set us apart as a company you want to do business with, but also as a company that's investing in its people and growing the company. And
also, we're going to talk about this in a minute, how that has affected us in the acquisition process and what that means for the seller on the sell side of the acquisition. But in when you were talking about the different seasons that we were going through, you mentioned about the advocate team, the employee advocate team. Tell me a little bit more about what that is and how that works and how you have seen its effectiveness.
Yeah, the ESOP Advocate Program we started a few years ago, and it is a program where employees can apply to become their location's ESOP advocate for a 2-year term. And applications are reviewed, and we're going to take into account genuine interest in employee ownership, previous time served as an advocate, and then also your interest in helping to support the ESOP programming that comes out, the ESOP Touchpoints. And so once an ESOP advocate is selected, we're going to bring them into Mobile, and we're going to have a 1.5-day class to train that group of ESOP advocates. And we're also going to use this as an opportunity for the advocates to receive a little bit of leadership training and opportunity to grow their soft skills, or as you like to call it, their power skills. And once they're trained, they will be the hands and feet of our ESOP Touchpoints and ultimately the first contact for ESOP questions at a local level.
So when we talk about the ESOP advocates and bringing people in, not only for training, but familiarizing themselves with the company, getting more I know immersed is the word I'm looking for, into the culture and being a part of that. Something else that we've done recently, and actually we stole this idea Haley, you know that we like to steal ideas. We stole this idea from a really good friend of ours out in Texas, Ray Sade. He told me about their new employee orientation program a couple years ago, and we've implemented that. And we are now, as quickly as we can, we're getting people into the home office, teaching them not only about the culture, but the ESOP presentation is a part of it. So when you see somebody who's just coming into the company, they don't really know anything about ESOP. They never heard about employee ownership. What do you think the hardest thing to get through to the people who are just coming into the company? What's the hardest part to convince them on what employee ownership is all about when they're brand new?
When they're brand new, I think you got to first break the ice that the money's real, right? So when they leave our ESOP Advocate Program, particularly the advocates, but even in the NEO, we like for them to walk away knowing the money's real. Here's the dollar value we've distributed in the last year, and also, hey, I cut the check, it's real. But I think once you get past that, I think it's to dial into what does that mean for my day-to-day? How does that change what I'm experiencing at this company versus the last place I worked at?
And it's interesting when we do the NEO, we actually ask them, the question I like to ask is, what will keep you here for 20 years? And we get that whole list on the board. And everything that they say, I believe, is part of the reason that they left the other company, because it wasn't available there. So now that not only do we have the benefit package, employee ownership, we have a culture of leadership development. That's another part of what we're all about at Threaded Fasteners, is growing leaders, teaching not only what we do, but who we are. And I believe the ESOP is part of that. It's become part of our identity. So as we go forward now, so in the early days, it was we had to get off the ground, and now we're moving forward. What do you see some of the challenges going forward as to, what's the next level of ESOP communication look like, or how do we continue to build on employee ownership going forward?
I think we continue to build, right? So you just said, how do we build? Well, we continue to build. It's a lot of the same communication. We just want to make sure that we're reaching those individuals. So earlier I mentioned that if you were close to the home office, you got to experience more about the ESOP. And we have to continue to create that at the local level, at our branches, at our manufacturing facilities, this culture of the ESOP matters, and people understand it and they value it.
And when you see people, and I know you've actually brought these to my attention, where people would say, hey, wait a minute, why are we throwing that away? That's something that we can use. So you really begin to see the transformation of what ownership is really about. We talk about Own It. We have actually the Own It Award now as someone who goes over and above, going the extra mile, so to speak. So Own It has become a big part of our language, how we talk about, not just metaphorically, but literally. We are owners of this company, beneficial interest in the growth of the company. And when you're sitting down now, Ashley, how does that, not only for the people that we're just hiring as entry-level positions, but how do you believe employee ownership might attract those that we're hiring at a more senior level? Someone who may be listening to the podcast and saying, man, that's a company I'd like to come be a part of. How does that resonate with those that may be a little further down in their career?
Right. So some people start out and they know they want to own something. Maybe they had, a parent or someone in their life that they saw start up a company and own it. But for the majority of people, they don't have that experience, and they don't ever think they'll be an owner of anything. And so just knowing that this structure is around, while there's not that many companies that are in this position, we are blessed to be a part of over 6,000 companies that are employee owned. So I think making sure that they hear the words, making sure that they hear the idea that they are a part of the ownership culture, right? So that's why we make sure that we are bringing them into the NEO and talking about the ESOP. We want our ESOP advocates talking to new hires. We want our managers talking about it in the hiring process, because it's a new concept for some people. Ownership is attainable, especially through an ESOP.
So when you think about, when was the first time you heard the phrase employee ownership? Did you hear it before you had come here?
Nope. My interview process.
So when we talked about employee ownership, and now we're over here, we turn our attention to the young one in the room. So from your generation, you write that great article in our thread every month, Hali, and it's from one generation to the other. How do you believe employee ownership resonates with our younger audience? And I have a follow-up question to that, because we talk about, retirement is for young people a long time. It's a long way away. And even was at some conference recently, and they had said, maybe to change the language a little bit from retirement to wealth building. So how does the younger crowd see employee ownership and its value?
Weirdly enough, the first time that I heard about employee ownership was in college, and I took a business ethics class, and it talked about the different ways that businesses could be owned, and the employee ownership model, and kind of how that works in a myriad of different ways. And at that same time is when I started to work at Threaded Fasteners. And in the beginning, I was a college student. I had really no idea what retirement and investing in your retirement actually looked like. It wasn't something that I really cared about, to be honest. I was there for a paycheck, and that was pretty much it. Even as a young person, still, I think about retirement a little bit differently than I would think my peers do, mainly because I am in the space that I'm in, to think about retirement, to think about ESOP on a monthly or weekly basis. However, we did bring someone new into our department recently, and talking to him about what the ESOP was, and seeing the look in his eyes where it's like, I don't know what this is, and I truthfully don't think that this is going to really impact me all that much. You can kind of see the shift in people when they really get it. And that's what I think. It takes a little bit of time. It does. And it takes a little bit of investment in yourself, in not only your career and what you're doing at Threaded Fasteners, but also investment in what you want your future retirement to look like.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I'm a lot closer to the other end of the deal, and I can see the end of the road. My runway's shortening up, so it's getting more and more exciting to me. And for those who are evolved towards that position of, yeah, this means a little more the closer I get to retirement, I would definitely fall into that camp. We're with Ashley Bryan. She's the CFO at Threaded Fasteners, and she is our local ESOP guru. And when we come back from this break, we're going to talk about what it is that the seller might see in an acquisition, the benefits of being an employee-owned company, going out into the market, wanting to buy a company. So we'll be right back.
Threaded Fasteners is a 100% employee-owned company whose mission is to create value in and for the people we serve. So, if you're interested in learning more about how we develop a people-centric culture, or if you're interested in a customized fastener solution, send us an email at culture@threadedfasteners.com. That's culture@threadedfasteners.com.
All right, Ashley, when we left, when we came back from break, we were going to talk about, the seller side of the acquisition. If there's somebody out there thinking about selling their business, about what the advantages are for them selling to an employee ownership, and a company that is employee owned, because I would tell you the experience with Frank and Steve and what it was for Frank. I believe a big part of his decision was continuing his legacy. He grew up the people that were running the company and continue on with what he was doing, and really what he had built in them and how they were able to take that forward. So how do you see that as an advantage when we go out and we talk to companies about buying their businesses? How is it to the seller's advantage to sell to an employee-owned company?
Yeah, I think a seller that's really looking to take care of their team members, like you mentioned, they care about these people who helped them over the years create a successful business that they were then able to sell, maybe to go into retirement, maybe for other reasons. But they care about their people, and they want to help ensure that they're taken care of. So they like the idea that their team will move into the ownership structure of an organization, if that's how it's set up. For us, it would be. And they value those people.
And when we think about the value proposition, and this is it, creating value in and for the people we serve, this is those owners creating value for their employees going forward, because not only would they now be owners of the company they're working for, they'd be owners of the big company. that has just come in and done the acquisition. So we've seen that come time and time again. And quite frankly, several of the acquisitions that we have, where we have acquired, the owners have stayed on and become a part of the team and a huge part of the success of the team going forward. So I'm very appreciative of those who considered those conversations with us about selling their company, because I think early on when we start talking about the advantages of us buying the company because we're an employee-owned company and the advantages it creates to the employees, I think it's a big part of that decision. I know it was a big part of the decision for Steve and Frank. So when we're back to our employees, so when we're communicating to the employees about employee ownership and about their part of it and what, they own their part. That's part of our communication strategy is when we talk to our team. We want them to own their part. So what are some more ESOP touch points that you can tell us about that we're doing now, and maybe even things that we have done in the past, or whatever? What are we doing on ESOP touch points?
Yeah, so we like to kind of change it up a bit and try to hit people where they are ready to receive the information. So sometimes we are doing a flyer that's been prepared by our marketing team, or maybe we're doing a Zoom class that's taught from the home office with a little more technical information. And maybe it's an in-person class that's going to be taught by the ESOP Advocate, or an email that's sent to all the employees. We just kicked off our 10 days of EO, and that's one of the things we're doing is 10 days of emails to our employees, to their personal email addresses, to learn more about their ESOP. And it could also be a conversation that the ESOP Advocate is tasked to have with certain individuals. So we're often going to try to involve food because that seems to draw people in, and it allows us to catch their attention a little bit longer. But we also want to make sure that the ESOP Advocate's job is easy. This is just a part of what they do, very small part. So there's a group of us at the home office that plan the communication pieces and really try to kind of hand them over a guide, so to speak, on how to interact and what's expected.
So our company has very similar to my children. All I have to do is say I'm buying, and everybody shows up. So I love the piece that we are putting food together. Our state of the company, another touch point when we do our state of the company address, talk about things that are going on in the organization. And I don't know that the ESOP necessarily pushed us towards state of the company type thing, but I think it just is part of the culture that has evolved into we want to communicate, not only what we do, but who we are and the things that are going on in the company. We can communicate employee ownership. I don't think we can over-communicate it. I think if nothing else, we have proved that you can't over-communicate. I was thinking about that this morning on how we communicate and all the touch points we do. We've evolved from communication that goes out through the mail to now we've evolved into people that have a 4-second attention span. Mm-hmm. And, trying to hit those generations because, I think I told you this earlier this morning, my favorite evangelist, Billy Graham, said the message never changed, but methods change all the time. And the message of the ESOP, we're an employee-owned company. We have to own our part. We have to grow and develop. But the methodology of how we communicate that thing is an ongoing process. And I'm appreciative of our ESOP advocates and our ESOP committee that is constantly looking. I know that this month we got all kind of things that'll be going on this month. Tell us a little bit about some of the things that we're doing this month.
Yeah, so this is Employee Ownership Month, and we have a lot that goes on. So we're going to do those 10 days of communication. We're also going to host some webinars to really help explain the ESOP better. We call it 101 and 201. You can come to both. You can come to just one if you feel like you only want to hear the early information. But it allows our team members, we're going to try to meet them where they are. And then there's an ESOP breakfast.
It's my favorite.
That's most people's. Here, the food. So it's going to be eggs, sausage, orange juice, and pancakes or potatoes, depending on what that location likes to have. So that one's one we always look forward to. And, there'll be a couple other things mixed in there. We've got our golf tournament during that time, and that's a great time for us to raise money to support Team Focus. And it's a great month. It's a busy month. But we've got a great committee, and Hali does a lot to help put that stuff together in addition to the other people on our committee that plan it.
when we look at the Employee Ownership Month, Hali, I know that you're leaning in here. Tell us a little bit about so make sure to put me down for the pancake thing. Egg, sausage, orange juice, pancakes, not potatoes.
Okay.
Pancakes.
Okay.
I feel like we've been doing both. We've finagled our way into just saying, why not have both? October is definitely a busy month for the marketing department. We are always really excited for October because it really is the time where we have the excuse to inundate people with a lot of information. Like you said, communication, there is never enough of it. And in October, we're able to say, okay, this is a full month where we're going to dedicate to really giving you all of the information that you need for all of the ESOP information that you might need. And you can refer to this throughout the year as well. It's always fun. We always have a lot of fun things up our sleeves each year. We try to mix it up a little bit, like Ashley said. But one of the things that I enjoy the most about ESOP Month is the questions that we get that come out of it. And we get more questions, I think, about ESOP in the month of October than we do throughout the year, even though we do an ESOP Touchpoint each month throughout the year, or we try to do an ESOP Touchpoint each month.
I want you to think about a couple of questions that you've heard over the last few years when we've done this, but I was going to remind both of you, this is October. This is officially Pumpkin Spice Month, and I was thinking P and S is in ESOP, that somehow we could figure out how to work in pumpkin spice to the ESOP plan. I'm certain there's something we can do.
I will always vote for a coffee-related activity.
Yes.
There is never a time where I say no to coffee.
So what would you think so just thinking back, what are some of the questions that have come to us about employee ownership? Anything jump off the page at you?
A lot of the times we'll get questions in the silos of age or close to retirement ages. So if you are newer to the ESOP and in a younger demographic, you're going to get questions like, when do I become fully vested? Is the money actually real?
When do I get a statement?
When do I get my first statement? And then once you get into that age where you're really thinking about retirement, you're wanting to know, when do I get distributions? How do those distributions come to me? Over what time frame? What will my retirement balance still grow after I retire? All of those different questions.
So that's fair. When you start getting closer to retirement, you start thinking about the distribution piece of it. So what are the questions early on? So that was kind of more geared to I think the vested question is fair. I think we probably hear that. How long does it take for me to be vested? When do I get? The other is, what happens if I terminate, or what happens if I leave early, and how those questions are answered. And I guess from an ESOP plan document, those vary from company to companies. Everybody handles that differently. So footnote here, we're not financial advisors. Is that what you wanted me to say? Refer to summary plan document on those official ESOP questions. I think the lawyer and Hali wanted to come out. And
thank you for that. I appreciate that.
So when we talk about this, though, the questions that come to us, invariably we go back to how we communicate, when we communicate, how much do we communicate, and quite frankly, can you over communicate?
Sorry, I'll take that one. You can. We've seen that with ESOP Month in the past, and it's because we want to do all of these things for ESOP Month, but we've realized that pulling it back and really intentionally focusing on a few key points rather than doing a bunch of different things at once.
Yep. I would say that you can over-communicate too much in a concentrated area like Hali's mentioning, but the end of the day, people, this is a small part of what's going on in their world. So if you space it out too much, they might forget some of the details. So just continuing to reinforce the big topics, that's really our responsibility.
And I would say communicating to our team, because they're listening. Our team is listening here, and communicating to them in this moment is when you're in a meeting and the format is to ask questions. Because when you're thinking about, somebody else is thinking about, they're just a little too afraid to ask. So ask the questions.
Well, since you've been giving us the questions so far today, I thought we might send one your way. You've worked at Threaded Fasteners for over 40 years at this point. How have you seen the company change over the years, and how have you seen the ESOP make an impact?
So I think the culture of our company was rooted and grounded in Steve and Frank's heart to serve. And I mean that in that the customer was always a customer. I never felt like they grew up in that era. The customer was always right. the customer was always a customer. Therefore, we valued how we handled our customer. And because of that, that's kind of the basis of the culture at our company is, we may get outpriced, but we don't ever want to get out hustled. And that was kind of the culture of urgency and care. But during the time that Frank was looking for his exit strategy, and then Steve, ultimately, when we became 100% employee owned, I really believe it was rooted in they wanted to continue the legacy that they had built, not only just for their own, and I don't think it was a pride thing. I think it was a tribute type of thing. They wanted it to continue to go and be handed off to the people that had helped them become successful in the business. So I think it has enhanced our culture. I don't think it is the thing that is the only part of our culture, because as we know, the culture is the people. And, we talk about a lot about that on this podcast, is culture is grounded in the people that come to be a part of the team. And so it has definitely enhanced the culture because we can switch from metaphorical ownership to literal ownership. So in that regard, it has enhanced, but I don't think it built the culture.
We've talked a lot about the chicken and the egg. So like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, when it comes to our culture. And I think that you're right. It's not necessarily that the ownership model is the culture, but a lot of companies that do become employee owned already had a piece of that in their culture. And that's the reason why they have transferred to that model.
So Ashley, when we talk about the next thing, this is Employee Ownership Month, and, okay, just imagine if you have 5 or 6 or 350 people listening. We're pitching a question to you they're going to be talking to them directly. They're kind of pulled up to the table. What's employee ownership all about? Where's the value in employee ownership? You got their undivided attention. What would you say to them right now?
So I think you have to embrace it, right? So you can't put it on a shelf and, read off the values and the core values and the mission statement and be able to repeat it and not mean it. It has to mean something to you. So employee ownership allows you to benefit from an organization that is intending to grow and is intending to support the people around it. But as part of that, you have to be ready to continuously learn and willing to learn and grow. I actually have a poster in my office that says, if you are not willing to learn, no one can help you. And if you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. Mm. And I don't know who wrote it, but it's had a lasting impact on me. And I think you also have to be aware of how you're presenting yourself. So do you appear like someone who doesn't want to share information? Do you appear as someone who's willing to learn, right? That's what we want. We want people to be willing to learn because they are accepting that they don't know it all already. And, I think that is one of the keys to our culture, and that employees, to be successful at our company, have to be willing to learn and grow and support the people around them.
And, since this is the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership podcast, and we're talking about leadership and ESOP, but what you just dropped on us here, what we would call here at the podcast a wisdom nugget. And when you think about a learner who can't be stopped, actually, when you talk about ownership responsibility in our organization, it is to develop people. That's part of the ownership. That's part of owning your part, is to help develop the people around you. When we look and evaluate employee, particular leaders at our organization, those emerging leaders, we're looking at people that are making everybody else around them better, those people that can't be stopped, that they've kind of got the bug for learning. And I think that is pretty cool to see some of the people in our organization that's caught on to that learning leadership bug, and they just want to grow, and you can see it in them. And I'm so proud of the things that we're doing in communicating employee ownership this month in particular, because it is the Employee Ownership Month. Having Ashley come down and talk to us about employee ownership, the technical parts of it, the parts where we're communicating the benefit of it. But when you asked a while ago about how's it built the culture, I believe it's enhanced it, but I do believe that it's transforming, because it's the perpetual model. It's the model that we want to continue to build, that go on to the next generation. It's not about, the years that I've been here or the years you've been in here. It's the group that's coming up behind Hali. We want that group to come up and continue to benefit from being an employee-owned company. So Ashley, last word. What's your final thoughts on anyone out there who's thinking about maybe selling their company to an ESOP, or maybe they're looking for an exit strategy and they want to convert their company to an employee-owned company? How would you speak to those business owners?
Yeah, I would say, find an advisor who knows a good bit about ESOPs and hear what they have to say, right? So the end result is your current employees and your future employees are going to benefit greatly from the decision. So can it work for you as an individual, as a seller, to also benefit the employees? So I would say seek out an advisor that specializes in ESOPs, and then also talk to companies that are ESOPs currently. There's definitely some technical administration issues and administration responsibilities. Maybe I should say that instead of issues. Administration responsibilities that have to be taken into account. But at the end of the day, it's worth it.
It's pretty cool, though. We've had a couple opportunities to some people have come to our office and talked to us about our experience. And I'm sitting there talking to them going, we actually know a little bit about employee ownership now when somebody is asking our opinion about it. And often is opinion and how we structured our ESOP. So that's been another cool experience. So, well, Ashley, thank you for coming and spending a little bit of time with us on the podcast. I know it's been informative. I know this isn't your comfortable spot, being behind the microphone with a headset. But like I said, we can practice in the office from now on. We can just bring headsets so we can do a little conversation in my office. So thanks for joining on the podcast. Haley and I'll be right back. All right, everyone. Haley, what a great episode. Just Ashley is so stinking smart when it comes to the things about the ESOP. And I know that she would tell you that she's not, but she actually is a brilliant thinker. When you talk about all the things we talk about in employee ownership, and we pivoted a little bit from leadership, but Ashley's one of those leaders that are leading by example and is always willing to help explain further the details. No matter who's asking the question, she can answer it at whatever level it comes in. What were your takeaways?
I think a lot of it was that while the ESOP might be a complex idea, and there's a lot of complexities that come along with it, the beauty in the ESOP is taking complex thoughts and structures and communicating that to employees in a way that they understand. Because sometimes if you don't understand it, you really can't put your whole heart into it. And so being able to do that, and Ashley does a fantastic job of saying, okay, this is the complex idea of how this all operates. How do we communicate that to our team? And
really, those are the difference between strategy and tactical. We've been talking about that for quite some time. When you think about the big idea, bring it down to ideas that can be executed right at the ground level. So I can't go away without the nuggets you dropped on us. If you're not willing to learn, no one can help you. But if you're determined to learn, no one can stop you. I love those leadership nuggets that we get from those proven leaders that come into the podcast. So, Haley, until we meet again, tighten up.
Tighten up. Thank you for joining the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership podcast, brought to you by the employee owners of Threaded Fasteners. If you enjoyed our conversation, please subscribe to, rate, and review the Nuts and Bolts of Leadership wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Do you have a leadership story to tell or a question to ask? Email us at podcast@threadedfasteners.com. That's podcast@threadedfasteners.com. This show is made possible by our family at Threaded Fasteners, Inc. Our mission is to create value in and for the people we serve. Interested in learning more about TFI and how we create value in our team, in our communities, and in our customers? Visit threadedfasteners.com. Thank you again for listening. I'm your co-host and producer, Haley Gibson.
And I'm your host, Billy Duray.
This show is edited and produced by Johnny Glenn and our friends at Deep Fried Studios.